Good. Yeah. So I just wanted to, yeah, basically continue from where Akupa left with the exploration of positive emotion. I mean, I really liked the way he brought out the emphasis on the heart. Yeah, how Buddhism, how Sangharakshita was kind of emphasizing the heart and how to bring out the heart and how to get in touch. That getting in touch with your emotions is actually really important in Buddhist practice, and sometimes it has been sort of neglected. But I also wanted to touch on first on how it also links back with integration. So we're looking at this sort of series of, well, it's really difficult to talk about it actually. There might be stages. Sometimes we call them stages of Buddhist meditation. Sometimes you can think of them as more like sort of qualities that you're trying to develop within your meditation practice. You're trying to have all of them sort of present in varying degrees. We were trying to, but you could also just see them as all the different methods of how to meditate. Yeah. Yeah, I hope that doesn't make it more complicated. But it's sort of what we call the system of spiritual practice. It comes from the system of meditation. So those stages, they're sort of ways how we work within meditation, but obviously they can be applied they have a meaning for our whole lives, yeah, for the whole spiritual life. So we're not just trying to practice integration or positive emotion in meditation, but also in our lives. And I thought Akupa had touched on that quite beautifully with positive emotion, how to bring that out in your life. Yeah, he was talking about how to get in touch with emotions in friendship, etc., etc. Yeah, but I'd like to say a bit more about how to do that a bit more systematically, maybe, and then touch on a few particular positive emotions. So first of all, we looked at integration. You're trying to find a way of integrating the mind around a central object like the breath. Yeah, so this is sort of my easy way of trying to summarize it. Is when we sit down and do the mindfulness of breathing, like we did just now, we're trying to sort of integrate the mind within itself. Yeah, we're trying to sort of create a sort of holistic mind, and we do that by general awareness, by opening up our consciousness of what's going on, and then by mindfulness of sort of setting an anchor for our mind, so that all the stuff that pops up through awareness can kind of be gathered around nicely, and the energies which might be locked up in that can be released. This might be a bit too simplistic, but I like to think of it in terms of integration as sort of opening it all up and trying to bring it together, and then positive emotion is sort of which direction we give that. Yeah. So through integrative practices, we can release all sorts of energies that might be locked up in our subconscious, or that might not be available to us because we so disintegrated all the time. But by bringing it all together, there can be a tremendous sort of flow of energy can be sort of unlocked. So then I think, okay, then positive emotion tells us, okay, where to put that energy, which direction do we channel it? So this is, for me, how they sort of work together. It's not always the case. Sometimes it can be, people can critique me on that, but it's not it's usually how I sort of see that, how those two fundamental stages, they sort of flow together nicely. Yeah, through integration, you try to sort of see what's going on, unlock potential, and then positive emotion is the sort of general direction. Yeah. So what Akupa already said is that obviously one of the core positive emotions in Buddhism is what we call metta. Yeah, metta, loving kindness. Although I do sometimes feel like the word loving kindness can sound a bit too soft, maybe. can sound a bit too gentle. It is very gentle, but I tend to just say love and then explain that we don't mean romantic love, sexual love. It is just this basic sense of feeling for another a being. Yeah, it's just this. For me, metta is this sort of basic turning towards my consciousness, turning towards another being's consciousness, and caring for them, feeling for them, wishing them well, really wishing all the best for them. So this is really what I think the Buddha meant by that sort of baseline positive emotion by metta. Yeah, so it's that. Well, the definition of it is it's unconditional love. Yeah, so it doesn't have any boundary. So even though I said for a being or human being, really real metta is once you feel that so strongly that you actually feel it for all beings unconditionally. Yeah. That's quite interesting. It's a teaching that goes right back to the Buddha. Yeah, it's not something that's sort of added on. It's actually something that's right there from the beginning of Buddhism, all through tradition, all through practice. Yeah. So that's quite interesting. So that's in many ways how you could say how the spiritual path starts to unfold, how our consciousness then unfolds, is that we dig up all that energy, we sort of create a harmonious mind, which can then turn towards others, which can then turn outside, which can then grow, which can then become vast and loving, full of love, and everything else sort of comes from that. It's quite interesting that in the Buddhist tradition, metta seems to be one of those baseline emotions where all other positive emotions developed out from. Yeah, so all other emotions like compassion or what we call sympathetic joy, or even things like equanimity, even things like devotion, they are just metta in action in a particular situation, playing out in a particular situation. Even the whole community of practitioners is, all those relationships, they're sort of supposed to come out of that metta, out of that turning towards others. I mean, teaching meditation now for a few years to quite a few people in Berlin. It is quite interesting to compare those two practices, the mindfulness practice and the metta practice, because many people at the beginning find the practice of mindfulness easier because it's a bit clearer what to do, because you can just follow your breath. But then the metta practice, they find a bit more difficult in the beginning. They find it a bit more like, oh, I don't quite know what I'm supposed to be doing. But interestingly enough, that is the practice where people see results much quicker than from the mindfulness of breathing. At first, they don't really realize it, but they do see their own change much quicker. It's quite interesting. People, quite after a few weeks of practicing it, they sort of come back and say, "Wow, like my relationship changed quite significantly to my coworker or to my family or whatever." And I was recently talking to a good friend of mine, Fabian, who's just was getting ordained. He's in Papaloka right now, getting ordained. And I mean, probably, maybe it's a bad example because Japan is so safe, but here in Berlin, when you go to certain subway lines, you do sometimes feel a bit like unsafe, or you feel a bit like, oh God, someone's going to yell at you or spit in your face, or I don't know. I mean, Berlin is a lovely city. Do come to Berlin, but don't worry, you're not going to be spat at. But there's sometimes you feel a bit, oh God, just don't make eye contact. Don't look at that guy or something. You can sometimes feel a bit like, what's going to happen? You don't want to get involved in things. And when I was younger, and Fabian was saying the same, every now and again he would get into a weird thing with someone on the subway, like it was as if people could feel can sort of smell your fear or something, or that you're a bit kind of anxious, and then sort of, I don't know, make a weird remark, or I mean, it's never violent, but it's just there can be a bit. I don't know. They can make fun of you or something at night. Maybe they're a bit drunk or something. So you can have sometimes in certain subway lines, not every subway line, but it can become quite unpleasant. But what I noticed, and Fabian was agreeing with that, is that with that practice of the metta bhavana over the years, because you sort of see people more and more in their humanity, in their humaneness, you sort of become more emotionally resilient. You become almost more emotionally robust, because you're less afraid of people. You see them just as people. And what many people here in the center have told me as well, is what they notice is that they get in less and less trouble on the subway with people. They get in less and less trouble on the streets as a result of that metta, because you're less afraid, and so people, maybe if they're a bit drunk or a bit, I don't know, antisocial or something, they less and less see a sort of way into you. It's quite interesting. So for many people, they're really happy. I mean, Berlin is not an unsafe city or anything like that, but it can become a bit unpleasant every now and again. And this is one of those things where people can actually see a direct influence on, oh wow, yeah, the way you change your mind has an effect on the world around you and the way the world sort of relates back to you. And you see people less and less as a threat, maybe, or a possible threat, and more as just people going about their lives. Yeah. So this is quite an interesting reflection, is that metta is actually something that has an effect on your environment quite strongly. The way you go into the world has an effect on how it sort of relates back to you. So yes, this is just one of those things which is lovely to see when you teach meditation, is that it has these effects, and people sort of feel better about themselves and about others. And obviously metta can be a whole path as well. Yeah, can be a whole path in itself. So this is not just, so emotional robustness isn't just where it stops. And the more you sort of lean into metta, Akuba was saying that as well, you're sort of never finished with metta. But it can even, I think, lead you all the way to that insight that you're not that separate from other people. I think that you could actually just do the metta bhavana and have some great results in terms of spiritual insights, because you start to sort of loosen that sense of separateness, and that separate self starts to sort of become much more transparent, and you see more and more how things are just sort of connected, and how they all sort of process. And I think you could probably sort of let go of your sense of self through those metta practices as well. I think there is actually I think I read somewhere, there is a path in a particular Mahayana tradition which only talks about love. That, at first you love yourself more than others, and then the more you practice, you cherish your friend as much as you cherish yourself, or you cherish others as much as you cherish yourself. But then if you go further, you cherish others more than yourself, so you're taking yourself less seriously than other beings. And then the next step, once you broaden that further, you lose complete touch of what is other, what is self. You're just so full of love, even though that sounds quite cheesy. But do you see what I mean? It's sort of you lose any sort of connection with, oh, here's me and I'm loving. You're just sort of completely interfused with self and other, and that sort of starts to lose meaning, those words. Yeah. So quite interesting that positive. So it's not just positive emotion isn't just a stage in a system. It could be the whole path if you would like to look at it in that way. Yeah, it could be your whole path really. You could make it your whole practice for the rest of your life, and everything else is in there. Insight is in there. Wisdom is in there. And I think that's the beauty of those stages, is that they're not really just stages, integration, positive emotion. They are also sort of all intertwined somehow, but it's just for the sake of method, we try to look at them from different angles. yeah, so this is metta, uh, and that reflects itself, that expresses itself, then obviously in your life through friendship, for example. I mean, I'm very fortunate here that I have a lot of good friends in Berlin who are also practicing. We call that spiritual friendship. Just being friends with other people who are also on the path, who are also kind of going the same way. And I'm quite fortunate with that because I do have a lot of them around, and I'm noticing how, I mean, I'm it's just noticing how important it is to have that around you within your practice. I've always had that image that, the way I experienced friendship, particularly within a Buddhist context, is that usually it feels like with normal friendships, usually feels like you're sort of looking towards each other. Yeah, you're sort of, this is me, this is my friend, and we just sort of love each other. Yeah, we're sort of in it together. But with people who are on the path and what we call spiritual friendship, I always had that sort of image that we're both looking in the same direction, where we're sort of going alongside each other. And it didn't really matter how much similarities there are or differences or whatever, but because you have that sort of same direction in life or something, it just everything else sort of comes out of that. And this is where you feel that connectedness and that connection. And spiritual friendship offers this sort of whole working ground for positive emotion. Things like love are obviously the obvious thing that comes into play. You can explore how to live out metta, but other things as well. You can being grateful, gratitude. It's a big positive emotion in Buddhism. That can play itself out in spiritual friendship. Beauty, appreciation of beauty. You get that in friendship a lot. I used to just always really fall in love with the beauty of my friends when I met them. So I'm much more mature now, but when I was younger, I was just always just really falling in love on retreats with people, like retreat love. But even all that is a sort of thing that sort of comes in. When you open your heart, really, when you let others in, and that can be a good working ground for how to bring out what you learn in meditation out into the world, is through sort of friendship. Things like Shraddha, that faith, devotion, comes out quite strongly in friendship as well for me, because it's you inspire each other, right? Sometimes when one person has maybe a bit of an off day, the other person says, no, come on, meditation, or whatever, or study, and it can really enhance your appreciation of the path and of positive emotion in that way. Yeah, it can really inspire faith in you. I guess I'll just sort of end with a story, which is where all that sort of came together for me. I might have told it before, I don't know, in here, but it was a few years ago. A good friend of mine, Triratna, and I, we went to the opera. I made him go. I forced him, he liked it as well. But we saw this really long piece. It was like 5 hours long. It was a Wagner opera, Tristan and Isolde, which is an opera about love. Very crazy, silly love, with lots of love potions, and it's a bit unclear whether you want to be in love or not. Anyway, but the story is they're not supposed to be in love. It's a bit like Romeo and Juliet or something. But they are anyway, because it's drama. And at the end of the opera, they die, obviously. But before she dies, well, it's a bit unclear whether she dies, but he dies. And because she doesn't have an object for her love anymore, for the whole opera, she's just completely infatuated with him. She just wants to be close to him. But in the end, he dies because he gets, I don't know, I can't remember, gets like stabbed by his father or something. I don't know. He dies. It's not important. But because she sort of loses the object of her love becomes bigger because she doesn't have a place for her love anymore. She just sort of transcends herself. So this is what Wagner calls the something like the self-transcendence of Isolde. So because she's so full of love of that person, but the person isn't there anymore, all of a sudden she just loves the whole universe. And anyway, we were sitting, I mean, it's 5 hours long. You're completely out of your brain while you're, when you reach that point of the opera. So we were sort of sitting there really tired. We had this lovely evening. We had like really good food. We had like lots of laughter and just so enjoyable to be there with Triratna. And then this last scene comes up, this aria, and you could really tell that the whole audience was completely mesmerized, was completely in awe of what was going on the stage, and was completely silent. And my experience was very peculiar, because it was I just had this experience of like as if the whole audience sort of started to float out of the seats towards the stage, towards that aria, which just sort of unfolds and unfolds, and her singing just becomes more and more dramatic and more beautiful. So it was just this incredible experience of, there's that love of hers, there's that beauty, there's, I was there with my best friend. There's this whole sort of complete experience of love, beauty, friendship, which was just, I was so like, I just felt so whole, like when you feel like so complete somehow in yourself, because there's just nothing else to add to that experience. It's almost as if you had a sort of complete being or whatever, because and you could really tell that the audience had a similar experience. It was all they were all just so taken by it. Yeah. But anyway, that's positive emotion for you. There's lots more to be said. Maybe I'll end here.